fix it. So today we're looking at handling COVID uncertainty, and the reason that I developed this webinar is obviously having sessions with many of the wonderful members of Music Victoria. There's a lot of anticipatory anxiety over what's going to happen next. What are we in for now? The goalpost has been moved again with the new variant. So we're going to look at radical acceptance of uncertainty. Radical acceptance is a little tactic in mental health developed by a woman called Marsha Lynham, who founded DBT therapy, but we won't stress too much about the theory. We're just going to get into the practical steps that you can take away. We'll have a look too at minimizing anxiety. So acknowledging that anxiety is a very visceral symptom. You know, we feel it in our bodies. It gets in the way of our day. It gets in the way of our well-being, our sleep hygiene, and of course our diet as well. So we're going to look at, again, practical strategies on minimizing the experience of anxiety. I've popped a little Q&A in the middle in case anyone wants to ask questions or we want to have a chat with one another. Of course, it's up to you. You don't feel that you have to. You're also more than welcome to put questions in the chat box and I can answer them when we get to that stage. Have a little look at self-empowerment and our future. We're really going to be focusing on hope and how hope can intersect into the kind of COVID situation, because it's very, very easy to lose hope, especially for our community. You know, our resilience is completely eroded. So we're going to look at how we can bring that back in. And then offsetting the media, which is a huge, huge, huge contributor to collective anxiety at the moment, is all the media consumption. Alrighty, so if we kick off with radical acceptance, we've got a nice quote here by the founder of dialectical behavior therapy. It's a little tactic within a wider modality of therapy. Radical acceptance rests on letting go of the illusion of control and a willingness to notice and accept things as they are right now without judging. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is I know what I tend to do and what many of us tend to do when we're anxious, we feel uncomfortable, or we're experiencing maybe a prior trauma, is we just try and that very post-war mentality, let's just get on with it. You know, I've just got to push through. And the problem is, in the long game, it almost never works. I've never seen it work. Usually there will be physical, visceral symptoms that will occur as a result of pushing difficult thoughts deep down. It's understandable that we do it. It's uncomfortable to experience emotional pain, but radical acceptance is one of the things we can begin to bring in really at the stage of COVID, I think too. It's probably quite a powerful thing to start considering. It's a tool that can help you face painful emotions and experiences without judging them and accepting them fully. It's often used in crisis survival techniques with sensory body awareness, but in this instance, we're just looking at accepting the current climate, the current reality, the reality of the constant uncertainty that the virus upholds, whilst it is classified a pandemic. So we need to remember too that it's still a pandemic at the moment. It won't always be. In America, there was a TV ad for painkillers, and during the commercial, there was a song that proclaimed, I haven't got time for the pain, or something like that. And we've all seen these sort of Panadol ads, like you just want to push through the pain and keep going with your day. So it's a good example of a general message in our culture, especially Western culture. Avoid pain, speed up the process of pain, and just don't deal with it. Now that's understandable. You know, many of us don't even have the time to be held up by any kind of pain, let alone an emotional pain, and anxiety, a grief, or a loss. So it's an understandable, you know, approach, and certainly it's sometimes necessary. Sometimes we just got to get on with it. We might be leading a team, we might be about to jump on stage and perform, we might be teching at a gig, like we just have to move forward. But we need to allow time to understand what we're experiencing in our bodies and in our minds. So radical acceptance is understanding that life involves difficult and painful events. Avoiding pain, especially in the long term, often leads to bitterness, guilt, anger, resentment, and quite often what I see is shame, a lot of shame. So this is giving us the opportunity to make choices, to make the choices we have to make, I suppose, in our lives, but without the added suffering brought on by the emotions. So accepting reality as it is and remembering that life is still worth living, even with painful experiences in it. And we'll look at that a little bit later on as well. Alrighty, drink of water. I hope you're all still with me. And again, just ping through any questions as we go. Happy to stop and speak to anything, or, sharing your insights and thoughts with others is powerful as well. So if we look at Lynam's approach, there's actually 10 steps for practicing radical acceptance using DBT. Marsha Lynam, as a mental health practitioner, if anyone feels like they want to Google her or look at her YouTube, she's a pretty straight shooter. She's not your classic therapist, not as hoity-toity, wanky-schmanky as some of us. She's very direct and she's very practical. So it's not for everyone. But again, what I'm always trying to do with these webinars is give you tangible skills so you can go away and feel empowered in the space of uncertainty, in the space of like chaos of COVID. We want to re-empower ourselves. We want to feel like there's a home within us while the world is doing its thing out here. So I'll send this across after the workshop. I recommend referring back to it when you have time to, dedicating maybe 10 minutes to it. So I'd give each step a minute if you really don't have time in your day. Even 15 minutes will give you a little buffer to really process the task. I've filled in the exercise. I'm going to whip through it really quickly to show you what the process can look like. So I did this about a week ago and I kind of sat in a space for 15 minutes with myself. In doing so, it was really uncomfortable, but I had more clarity and understanding over COVID, the reality of COVID, the reality of my sense of self, my sense of being, and my mental health in the process. So if we go through quite quickly, because I'm mindful that it can be a bit tedious listening to someone else's journey. But step one is observing that you're fighting against reality. For example, it shouldn't be like this. So my view on COVID is this is going to ruin my chances of ever feeling secure as a young adult. It's essentially ruining some dreams and visions I had for my future, for my family. Step two is reminding yourself that the unpleasant reality cannot be changed. So for me, that was essentially acknowledging it is what it is right now. Shit things happen all the time in life and all our lives, but alongside good things. So alongside good, positive things, shit things will happen. That's unavoidable, unfortunately. Step three, acknowledging that something has led to this moment. So this is how X happened. When she developed this, it's often for people to reflect on maybe a situation that they created in their lives. Where this is a bit tricky is we did not create, or maybe collectively, if you want to get macro on it, but we did not create the situation. We did not create DQ caps and restrictions. This is external to us. So for me, it was acknowledging that germs and viruses recur throughout history, and this was COVID's time. And it was just unfortunately luck of the draw that it's in a time that I'm existing on the earth. Step four, practice acceptance with not only your mind, but your body and spirit. In quite a few of these workshops now, and for anyone that's had one-to-one sessions with me, we do a lot of work on breath. Breath is really, really powerful, especially for mitigating the really visceral symptoms of anxiety. But even just a hand on the heart. Now, depending on where you feel your anxiety and fear, and we'll take a minute to think about that soon, but do I feel anxiety in my chest? Does it give me a headache? Is it in my stomach? Is it in my solar plexus, or all of the above? So for me, with the acceptance with my body, it was hand on the heart. There's a sort of a heavy, solid matter on my chest. So hand on the heart and just breathing and tapping the heart as I was doing the exercise. So really understanding where I feel it. It's very uncomfortable. And just a reminder, if it feels too uncomfortable to do alone, please feel free to book in with me and we can run through the exercise together. List what the behavior would look like if you did accept the facts and then act accordingly. So my behavior would be less day-to-day resistance, less bitter conversations with my partner about what the government's doing, what COVID's doing, and more clarity and focus in my work and in my passions. 6, plan ahead with events that seem unacceptable and think about how you should appropriately cope. So, I mean, how many of us have had flights cancelled or gigs cancelled or income loss, right? It's pretty hard to kind of know how to pivot. But for me, I've had quite a few opportunities to reconnect with loved ones cancelled. I've missed a funeral of a family member. So acknowledging that disappointment and grief is okay, that was really powerful for me. It's actually okay to be disappointed. It's even okay to rage out a little bit. Just acknowledging that in the moment instead of pushing against it, allowing the process. Remaining mindful of physical sensations throughout the body, such as tension or stress. When I was doing the exercise, and it will probably be different for all of you, I felt the shoulders go up. So really noticing this is my body reacting to all of this emotion. You can imagine we go years and years of our lives without acknowledging that we're tensing our shoulders, tensing our neck and back. Embracing feelings such as disappointment, sadness, and grief. I feel COVID in my heart. I feel it in my stomach. Just acknowledging it, really embracing it too. You know, you almost want to treat it. If any of your parents, I mean, we all kind of self-parent as well, even if you don't have kids, if any of your parents or have a pet, you know, really embracing that uncomfortable feeling, like giving it a little bit of a cuddle internally. Acknowledge that life is worth living, even when there's temporary pain. So I still feel like laughing sometimes, and I still meet the odd dog on the street that is adorable and I pat. You know, I still take the piss out of my mates. So there's beautiful experiences that coexist with grief. You know, even when we're feeling grief and pain, we feel happiness, joy, laughter. It's still there. And the final step is, if you find yourself resisting, complete a pros and cons exercise to better understand the full impact of your choice. This is where it gets a bit icky, right? Because this isn't our choice. You know, we don't have autonomy or agency over COVID and the government, but we do over ourselves. So it was a very personal pros and cons. I won't go through it, but I was pretty blown away as to some of the things that have come out of the virus. So thinking about some of the relationships I reassessed, you know, because time looks very different with COVID when you aren't able to see people, you aren't able to make time to connect with people. So some relationships shifted really positively, and boundaries were put in with some relationships that weren't that positive in my life. You know, developing a firmer awareness of who I am and what my values are. So just, and the cons list was interesting too. It wasn't as confronting as I initially thought. So again, this is just 10 steps for radical acceptance. It can be a little bit exhausting, but this is, I'm always saying to people that come into sessions, mental health, mental well-being, it's like F45 and BFT for the soul. It's not meant to be easy, but bit by bit, dribs and drabs of the process of getting to know yourself, one day you'll just break through the wall, truly. And you really do feel that you have a firmer hold or a firmer understanding on how to ensure your mental well-being is, you know, more positive, more nurturing, more self-nurturing. That's the ultimate goal. Thanks for sticking with me, team. That was a big one. Okay, minimizing anxiety. Anxiety, possibly one of the most infuriating and challenging mental health symptoms. And I believe that to be because we experience it very viscerally. It's very physical. You know, we've all had that. We feel it in our bodies, our chest, stomach, in our head, our arms, our legs. So I want to offer you again just some strategies that I've seen that really do work in bringing down those symptoms, bringing down that intensity of anxiety, as well as the chronic anxiety associated with burnout. We know those two intersect. If we're constantly anxious, we're going to crash. It's just our body's way of coping. In a moment, you'll see why the dog picture is relevant. But again, another really great resource to take away for those of you that do not know her is Tara Brach. So she's an amazing practitioner based over in the States. Stacks of free resource on YouTube, stacks of free resource on Google. And she says here, we're in a trance of thinking, we're time traveling, always in the future, in the past. And I know that to be true for many of us. We're human beings, we're always problem solving. It's how we've survived. Like, I can't do that thing I did back there ever again. I regretted that time I cracked it during a meeting, or I regretted that time that I blew up at my partner. So I'm not going to do it again. And then we're always thinking ahead, like worst case, to protect ourselves, but it's very, very exhausting. It's impossible to get rid of it completely. We're human, but we can ground ourselves and we can bring ourselves back to our inner home, to our inner sense of self-empowerment. So we'll look at that on the next slide. And again, team, if you have any questions or you want to share any strategies that have worked for you, please just pop them in the chat. It's so lovely to get peer feedback as well, you know, between one another. Okay, so as mentioned, we've spoken about breathwork in the past, and if you do any sessions with me one-to-one, confidential counselling sessions, we will look at breath work quite significantly. Breath work is very powerful if you don't have time. So if you're not at home and you're not in a space where you have full autonomy, like your house or at a family member's or somewhere private, breath work's really the go-to for anxiety, and we neglect it all the time. In fact, for many of us, we're shallow breathing throughout the day without even realizing. So I have done quite a bit on that prior. If you've missed those sessions or you want more information on breath work, you can book in with me via the website or just shoot me an email and I can send you resources, and you don't have to do a session. It's totally up to you. But with these particular examples, so these are all, and this is the first time I've done this, these are examples I've pulled from the last 6 years of supporting clients. So this is what I've seen work firsthand in terms of anxiety and actual tangible strategies, specifically during COVID. So specifically, we'll be looking at media consumption as well, which is really profound. Grounding techniques, if we start there in terms of instant grounding techniques, the idea of a grounding technique is that it creates space from a distressing feeling or thought in nearly any situation. They're especially helpful if you're dealing with distressing future-based thoughts. What they do is essentially reduce your cortisol levels, which influence anxiety. And they also help to calm your autonomic nervous system. If you relax even slightly, it's a win, right? If you've got even a slight amount of focus or clarity that you didn't have a moment ago, you're winning and you need to keep doing it. So on the left-hand side, I've shared a list of grounding exercises that clients have shared with me over the years, just to get you thinking, because what really counts is that it feels aligned to who you are and what makes you feel grounded. For me, vacuuming and paradiddles on the drums are the two things where my brain just switches off. Like it just doesn't, there's so much interactive motor skills, task involved. It's task-based as well, especially vacuuming. I don't really go anywhere else. So if you can just sort of tap in and think, what's something that offers me a sense of flow, you know, or a sense of rhythm when I'm doing it, even 5 minutes just to begin to relax your muscles, soften your body, soften that body, because it hardens and it edges when we get anxious, and we just want to bring it back, get the autonomic nervous system really relaxing. So vacuuming dishes, playing your instrument, I'm sure most of you have something, any kind of creative outlet, knitting, ironing, a puzzle, Legoing, organizing books, something really boring, really boring, but that requires a lot of focus, you know, but not focus where you're intellectualizing. So organizing things is really powerful. And cooking yourself a meal. And the reason I wanted to include that is, as we get anxious and we get stressed, we obviously sometimes self-neglect. Cooking yourself a meal is a really beautiful act of self-mothering and self-fathering and self-parenting, right? So remembering to, you know, cook yourself a meal as if you're cooking it for someone else. It can be a really profound thing to do for yourself. So we're going to look at the media as well, and have a wee bit of a chat about media consumption a little bit later on. But I do see this again and again in almost every session right now. Media consumption is at an all-time high. It's beyond understandable. We rely on media updates to inform our livelihood. Personally, professionally, we need to know about DQ caps, interstate border closures, wanker tennis players getting deported, you know, whatever it may be. We need to remember that once we've sought out the piece of information that we're after, we can actually turn the news app off until tomorrow. I'm not aiming to get everyone to become a Buddhist monk and never check the news. But we do want to be very conscious about the time of day we're looking at the news and how long we're spending looking at the news and which news outlet, you know, we're choosing. If you're looking at it in bed or before bed, it's probably not going to be a great sleep, you know, and certainly I know it's hard to resist. I went cold turkey on ABC News about 4 weeks ago, and I still feel completely across everything because society has an amazing way of keeping you across the national gossip. So I don't feel like I miss out on any major updates, but just reducing, so bringing down your social media consumption, becoming mindful, especially of broadcast television, which is very poetic and dramatic in the way they deliver, you know, seemingly facts. And just even giving yourself 20 minutes. So I'll do 10 minutes early in the day and then 10 minutes in the afternoon, but really trying to cap it down if you can. you've got to remember that this is all going into our subconscious mind as well. So it all sits back here and it just percolates. So just being really, really mindful. We'll come back to media consumption soon. Self-talk. So communicating out loud might sound like a bit of a weird thing to hear, but self-talk contributes not only to emotional regulation, but also to some higher cognitive functions, so meta skills and reasoning. And above all, it helps you build a stronger relationship with yourself. For anyone that has kids or nieces or nephews or friends with kids, you'll notice that when children play, they talk to themselves, right? And you see this really strong sense of identity forming. And that becomes muted over time as we grow. So it's quite profound, you know, like we get older and there's just an expectation. You don't ever talk to yourself. You keep all your thoughts in your head and you mute your physical voice. So sometimes for me to not feel like a dick, I will walk my dog, walk down the street and voice record my thoughts. It sort of looks like I'm on the phone. It's like a verbal journal. But it really, when I'm really, really anxious, it helps me just to make sense of what's beneath the anxiety, you know. Is it fear? Is it apprehension? What's driving that secondary symptom of anxiety? Now, if you don't feel comfortable talking out loud, of course, the other approach is journaling, really, really powerful. So just 5 to 10 minutes of just a stream of conscious thought. Don't overthink it. You don't even have to read it again, but you'd be amazed after 30 days, the impact, you know, because this is all about understanding yourself. This is all about self-empowerment, and that will come out once it becomes a habit, and the anxiety should reduce. How are we feeling, team? And is everyone following along with the slides? Can people just put in if they're having any issues seeing them or if they're clear as day? Can't see any complaints, so we must be traveling okay. Alrighty. So animals in nature, hence the dog slide earlier. I am aware there's people here that might not be comfortable with animals and I might not be a fan of them. So I've incorporated nature into this discussion as well. If anyone wants to Google nature and mental health, you'll find hundreds of articles on the power of taking your body and mind to trees or waves or any form of nature. Exposure to nature not only makes you feel better emotionally, it contributes to your physical well-being. So it reduces blood pressure, heart rate, muscle tension, the production of stress hormones. The impact that animals can have on anxiety is quite amazing, specifically a much loved pet. You know, equine therapy is really powerful. There's a lot of data coming out around equine therapy and the power that horses have on healing trauma. It's quite amazing what animals can do. So there's still some mixed studies on the day-to-day impacts, but there's a few various universities in the States that have identified that interacting with animals does decrease cortisol. And we spoke earlier about how it's a stress-related hormone that contributes to anxiety. And again, they lower blood pressure. Other studies have found, obviously, that they reduce loneliness, they increase feelings of social support and accountability, and they boost your mood. So sometimes when my dog goes to the toilet in the house, my cortisol does peak again and I get stressed out and pissed off. But I'd say that the benefit outweighs the risk in terms of his positive impact on my anxiety levels. So if you can't easily access nature, if you're in the city, even a local park that has some nice flowers, trees, take your shoes off, put your feet on the grass, designate a day per month. It's not a huge ask just to visit a forest or a beach or something that speaks to you. You need to think about what really speaks to you. Buy the pet you always wanted, borrow a dog, but just obviously make sure that you have the capacity to buy a pet, but they are profoundly impactful on, you know, just mental well-being and the positive output there. Again, I will send this PDF across to everyone that's attended. So you've got this on hand in case you forget, so don't feel you have to remember everything we're going through here. I'm just going to quickly check in to see if anyone has questions. Usually Kiwat jumps in here, but any questions for the chat or verbal? We're all cruisy Susies today. Okay, cool. Alrighty, if anything comes to mind, just pop it in the chat. And also, if you want to ask anything confidential, my first day back from leave, I can't speak. I'm sorry, team. Confidentially, please shoot me an email. We can have a conversation. Hopefully, I'll be able to master my English a little bit better once I've had a coffee. But yeah, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to respond to your question via email, or we can do a phone call or a Zoom session. It's completely up to you. And actually, while I've got the time, given there's no Q&As coming through, any questions, a counselling session with me, with our service, is entirely confidential. I do tend to forget that people get a little bit apprehensive about counselling. Like, are you going to put my information somewhere? You know, are you going to share my stuff with the government? Can you institutionalize me? I just want to reiterate that if you have a counselling session with me as a psychotherapist, it's all about where you are right now. It's about your journey, what you want to achieve. I'm really just a champion for your wisdom. I'm not here to diagnose you or suggest that you get medication. So just reassuring you that if you have been wondering, should I see Bree? I'm not sure. Maybe you've had a bad experience with the sector previously. All understandable, but please know it's really just about your well-being and getting to know one another, and you having a safe space to connect in and be heard. So I just thought I'd drop that in as we have the time. Hopefully you can all see the lovely Martin Luther King Jr. on my screen there. And I just want to share a quote by him as well, because fostering hope is really important at this time for our community. We are so impacted by this virus, you know, whether you're a business owner, a bar manager, sound tech, driving buses to festivals, musician, you know, everyone is impacted. Everyone. This virus obviously doesn't discriminate, but certainly our community was the first off the roadmap, first to be shut down and the last to be considered and put back on. So it's really understandable if your sense of hope is diminished. Martin Luther King said we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Thinking about archetypes that inspire you. So thinking about whether it's Rosa Parks, Jim Carrey, the Dalai Lama, Maya Angelou, whoever inspires you, really looking to those figures. They can be your dream figures, you know, your higher self that you can lean on in times where you feel that you just don't have it in you. You're just done. You're exhausted. So spending time with optimistic people, watching inspiring media, talking about media again, put on a documentary that inspires you, you know, watch a story or listen to a podcast that actually makes you feel like, holy shit, that was amazing. Like, you know, hearing that person's journey, actually, there was a spark. It's very easy to turn to, what's on now? Married at First Sight, trash, just total trash. Even true crime podcasts are super addictive. I totally relate to that. It's very, very hard to break the cycle of a true crime podcast. But just acknowledging how often we're putting the kind of darker side of the world in our ears and trying to just balance it with something a bit inspiring. Like, I'll occasionally tap into my inner child and just pop Moana on or put a Disney film on in the background while I'm eating brekkie. And again, it's just to balance out, you know, because really, truly, everything that we consume in our mind is going to viscerally inform how we react when we're under pressure. So we want to try and bring in a bit. It seems like really simple stuff, but it's really, really powerful. It's the small things. Taking a moment too to acknowledge your inner strengths, your artistry, maybe your loyalty, your sense of humor, your ability to listen actively to others and connect with people, whatever your strength is. Remember to honor that. You know, it's your birthright to be here. It's your birthright to feel safe and feel like you have a sense of home within you. And it's very easy to lose that, you know, especially during the last 2 years, to lose clarity over who we are. There was a positive psychologist, Charles Snyder, and he developed the hope theory, him and his colleagues. So hope, you know, in his eyes, gives people will, determination, a sense of empowerment. And, you know, these things are what I suppose allows us to reach our goals, reach our full potential. His team studied over 200 adults who were being treated for social anxiety disorder, panic disorder, GAD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So all very anxiety based, using CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And the study concluded that hope was a common element and a strong predictor of recovery from the symptoms of all of those specific disorders. So whilst hope can fade, and certainly, I've felt it during this virus, and I think we all have, just reminding yourself that it can also return. So if you don't feel hope right now, you can in the future, you can foster it again, and you can do so by really tapping into those spiritual figures that inspire you. For me, it's Lizzo and Beyonce. For you, it's going to be someone else, but really looking to people that represent strength and empowerment for you. These little reframes on a day-to-day basis can actually really reduce anxiety. And then at an individual level, it moves to a collective level. If you can too, just consider allowing space in your week to consume really good media, right? I know that there's a few people talking about Married at First Sight and numbing out to that. And I know that's going to be hard for some people to break because it's trashy Aussie TV, but just trying to find even a day where you maybe listen to a podcast that's inspiring. Something I've been suggesting for a few of my clients to do that are registered in to the counselling sessions is actually do a little offset. So if they're really struggling to stop checking ABC News or checking the media for all the various updates, just ensuring that they're at least having a balanced view. So here's 3 websites. And again, I'll send this off afterwards, but here's 3 websites that you can hit up after your little ABC session. Positive News is my personal favorite, the one on the far right. It's a UK-based website, but they cover stories from all around the world. These websites focus on the good that is happening currently, every single day on the planet. The world and the universe operates within duality, just like our mental health. I'm going to be depressed and dissociated on a Sunday, and then by Wednesday, I'm feeling pretty good and check and balanced and motivated. We're human, we're part of the universe. It's, I've wanked on about duality a few times in these sessions, but isn't it funny that we have a fear-based negative bias, because that's how we've survived and become, this ultra species that's built cities, and, we've outlived the Neanderthals, and we've done that by having that negative bias that I need to always be alert. I need to make sure that the neighboring tribe doesn't take me out and some tiger around the corner is not going to eat me. It's powerful stuff, but we're in a world that's information overload, and it's very, very easy to be fed certain agendas at the moment. We're all aware of this. So if you do need to do your news check, you've done your 20-minute scroll, 5 minutes even on one of these websites just to balance out your perception of the world. I'm getting this a lot in session. People are just going, this is dystopian. Like, how do I live through this? And I get it, but it is also what we're being told and fed, and we're all kind of bitterly gossiping with one another about what might happen next and how shit this is. So just giving yourself that space to see the good and be open to it. If anyone ever comes across any other news sources, positive news sources similar to these, please flick them through, because they're an amazing little resource for myself and for clients as well. I think we're actually doing bloody well for time, team. So I'm just going to bring up this next slide, which is a QR code, just to give you a little bit more information as to the program for those of you that don't know much about the mental health program at Music Victoria. It's funded by Partners in Wellbeing, and that's a state government initiative. Our funding's through till June. What we really need to ensure that we're funded beyond June, so to ensure that all of you can access free mental health sessions, webinars like this, workshops that we have up and coming, as we need feedback for the government. So I'm going to bring up a QR code on the next slide. If you have a phone, it would be awesome if you could just take a photo. It takes about 30 seconds to fill in. Once it pops up, a link will open up. And please be as honest as you like. If you found this completely unhelpful and you were like, I know way more than this girl, please pop it in, put in what you'd like to hear about, put in what you'd like to do more of, and we'll make it happen. If you thought it was awesome, great, put that in too. But the main thing is that state government sees that people are actually attending. Whether or not it resonated, that's fine. But this really, really helps team. This helps us get funding and to continue the service. And I'd like to continue it forever, please. But we'll see what they come back to us with. So if you have taken a photo of that and opened up the link, thank you so much. Thank you also for putting up with me coming back from annual leave and a few coffees short. Gee whiz. The humidity and overcast is not helping. There's some support services here as well. So obviously Lifeline, standby support after suicide for anyone that has been affected by a loss during this time or at any time. Heads Up by Beyond Blue if you're perhaps in a team leader position, a management position, or you own a business. Heads Up is a really great resource in terms of staff mental health and how you can actually inform the policies at your organization. Partners in Wellbeing, that's our helpline. So I would recommend just reaching out directly to me if you feel like you'd love to have a chat. So Bree at Music Victoria. The phone number is there. Probably the easiest way is just go to the Music Victoria website. There's actually a booking link, so you can just click the link directly, book in, change the appointment if you need to. It's all very cruisy and you don't actually have to talk to anyone, but we do have a helpline as well. And the other one down there is Support Act, of course, the amazing team at Support Act. I am going to round off today with a very quick grounding exercise. I wanted to say thank you for hanging out this morning, and it's been a nice little chill group, nice and quiet. So I hope that you've been, enjoying in your ears if you're working away, or at least, if you've been watching, even better. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to inject myself into your Thursday morning. The grounding exercise we're about to do is just a nice little easy cruisy one. I think given the content wasn't too heavy today, we don't need to do a very long guided visual piece. But if you want to join in, feel free to leave the cameras off. If you can, stop your work for a moment. That would be amazing. And just sort of taking the time to soften yourself, because that was a lot of information and you guys did really, really well.